Let's talk about the benefits of long-term versus short-term goals. And to kind of give away the big takeaway here in the beginning, you really want both. You want to use both, you want to use them together, but let's run through them. Let's take a quick look at what short-term goals are, what those look like, what some of their benefits are, what long-term goals are, what their benefits are, and then we're going to talk about how we can use them together to really make some progress and build the life that we want. So, starting out with short-term goals, what are they? They are typically things that you can accomplish in anywhere from 1 day to maybe 2 to 3 months. So, fairly short time frame here. And that kind of has some benefits. The first of them is it has built-in urgency, because these are things that are done immediate. So you're going to see an immediate result when you reach that goal. And because it's such a short time frame, you're going to really want to focus and get in there and get it done. It creates that built-in urgency and immediacy. The other thing is short-term goals are more manageable. By scope, they're just smaller, and because of that, they can seem less overwhelming. So having a couple of short-term goals, especially in the beginning of a new journey, can be really great, because it sort of sets the tone and gives you some momentum. And the other big benefit is that they are very specific. They have a small scope. We already talked about this a little bit. So an example would be that maybe I want to write a short report to use as a new lead magnet for my business by the end of the week. I know exactly what's entailed. It's very specific. Maybe I need that new lead magnet, or it's something that I can get done by the end of the week. So that creates that urgency. I'm going to make sure it gets done. It doesn't get put on the back burner. And it's not a very overwhelming task, especially because this is something I have done more times than I can count at this point. So very doable, great short-term goal for me. So the benefits of using short-term goals are you get some immediate feedback, whether this is working or not. I can get some feedback right away about whether or not that new lead magnet is something my audience is interested in, that kind of thing. It can also create some motivation. Again, you're hitting that first milestone, you're crushing your goal, your short-term goal. It can keep you going. It's also very flexible and adaptable. If at the end of the week I decide, the topic that I chose for my short report didn't really work out, or maybe it was too broad of a topic for a short report. It's really more something that needs to be done in a series of videos, a series of short reports, that kind of thing. I can adjust from there. At the end of the week, I'll know exactly where I'm at, what's going on, and I can change and adjust from there, and maybe make the scope of my short report much smaller. It also gives you a lot of focus and clarity. It's because it is so small and manageable, you know exactly what you're going to work on. It's not this big, huge, multi-step project that will take months or maybe even years to complete. It's one small project, very focused, and I know exactly what I need to do, step 1, 2, 3, to be done by Friday, that kind of thing. One thing I want to point out is then when you set these short-term goals, is you want to make sure they are SMART goals. So they're very specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And I will leave a link below to a even smarter goal-setting course that we have available for you at Smart Pick Marketing. Now let's talk about long-term goals. And spoiler alert, yes, you want those to be SMART, or even better, smarter goals as well. But long-term goals are really things that take at least, I would say, 3 months plus. Often those are things that will take years. And another way to think about these long-term goals is as a vision of the future. Where do you want to be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Where do you want to be in your business? Where do you want to be in your personal life? Where do you want to be with your health and wellness? Those are going to be your long-term goals, and as you will find out shortly, they will be supported by short-term goals. So long-term goals, anything that takes at least 3 months or more, often these goals will take years to complete. So they are very strategic. You want to go in with some careful planning to make this long-term plan happen. So this is often, you're building a business, you're planning to buy a house, you're starting a family, you're changing careers, those kinds of things. They're also very visionary. So I really encourage you with these long-term goals to spend some time to think, figure out what you want, and don't be afraid to think big. It is amazing what we can achieve on a long enough timeline. We're very good at overestimating as humans in general what we can get done in the short term, but we are also very good at underestimating how much we can get done and what we can accomplish when we start to think in years and maybe even decades. These long-term goals are also going to be very broad. It's not as specific as writing this short report. It's broad, like building this new branch of my business or building a business from the ground up. So these are really going to be your overarching themes, your overarching projects. That's why you really want to think big here. So an example here is to build a business to replace your full-time income. That was one of my long-term visions when I was much younger. I had a little baby at home, and it took a couple of years, but I made that vision come to fruition. So that was a long-term goal that I achieved and continue to achieve. So some benefits of having these long-term goals are that you have some very clear vision and direction. If you get clear on your long-term goal, you put it in writing, you keep it front and center so you can see it at all times. It almost becomes like this compass that helps direct your day-to-day action. It helps direct your short-term goals. It helps direct everything you do. You have that clarity, you have that vision, and you feel like you have some direction and you know where you're going. It also really teaches you both persistence and patience to go after those long-term goals. Why? Because they take some sustained effort over long periods of time. Building a business from scratch isn't something that's going to be done in a day. Losing 60, 70, 80 pounds of weight isn't something that's going to be done in a day. Training for a marathon, whatever it is that you want to go after, these long-term goals really teach you to stick with it, to put in the work, and to kind of sometimes wait for the end reward for quite a while. And that is not a bad skill to have, especially in this day and age. Long-term goals also have the benefit of teaching you about comprehensive planning. You have to really, once you have that big dream, that big vision, you have to do some planning and some research and figuring things out about how you can make this happen. It teaches you to, of course, think strategically, but also to think and plan ahead. So my tip for you there is be visionary. Really think back, think big, figure out exactly what you want, and then, and only then, you want to turn those long-term big goals into smart or smarter goals as well. So now that we've covered what exactly short-term and long-term goals are and what their characteristics are, let's talk about how they fit together, because they're really pieces of a bigger puzzle that work together to support each other and create what you really want to accomplish and create. So how do you balance these long-term and short-term goals? Because at the end of the day, they should work together. So you have your big long-term goal, and then you have short-term goals that support the long-term goal. So the example of the short report that helps build a list can be one piece of the puzzle of reaching the long-term goal of building a sustainable business that replaces a full-time income. So how do we balance them? The first thing is we want to be consistent. We want to work on these things and go after these goals every single day. And we want to make sure that our short-term goals support and are in alignment with our long-term goals. That it isn't always possible 100%. For example, in the beginning, I needed to do some work that brought in money, and I worked as a virtual assistant, as a VA, as an assistant, to help pay the immediate bills so that I had the time to build the long-term business. So sometimes it's a little indirect, sometimes you have to take a little detour, but at the end of the day, always keep your long-term goals front and center and make sure you do something every single day to work towards those goals. You want to make sure that everything you do is relevant to reaching those goals, either the long-term or the short-term. Ideally, you want them to be relevant to both. And you want to divide your long-term goals into incremental steps. One of the big problems with long-term goals is that they can seem quite overwhelming, and that sometimes you're sort of stuck in the mud, especially in the middle. You feel like you're not really making progress. By breaking those down into smaller, more manageable steps and turning those into your short-term goals, you will gain some momentum, you will make some progress, and you will stay motivated. You also want to set some achievable targets. And again, here, that also human problem of overestimating what we can get done in the short term and underestimating what we can get done in the long term poses a little bit of a problem. So you want to kind of play with that and tweak and maybe not put so much pressure on you and expect too much from yourself on a day-to-day or weekly basis, but kind of overestimate in your estimation what you can get done in the long run. So it sort of evens out. You have to maybe play with it a little bit, and don't be afraid to move and change those deadlines as time goes along. And then you want to keep tweaking and adjusting. Not everything that we think is going to work will work. Some things will surprise us, some pleasantly, some unpleasantly. Sometimes things fall into place and get done a lot quicker. Sometimes they don't. Don't be afraid to change course, to change scope, and don't be afraid to change your long-term goals along the way too. If you find out that what you thought was your ideal vision, the life you wanted to create, and it turns out that it isn't so, it's okay. That's why we set these goals to and set both long-term and short-term goals to make sure we stay flexible and are able to adjust and change as needed. And then use your short-term goals to provide you with feedback. If I work on this short report and I find out, for example, that I really don't enjoy sitting at my desk and typing away at this thing, then maybe I can switch to a video format or do some live classes or do some social media type campaigns, some education, some outreach there. Be flexible, try different things, and use these short-term goals to figure out and inform your long-term goal, and use that feedback to tweak and adjust as needed. And learn from it. There's always something we can learn every step along the way. We get better at estimating what we can get done on a daily basis. We get better at estimating what we can get done in a month. So learn from every single step, every single short-term goal, and use those to inform and make even better plans for your long-term goals. And then you also want to prioritize. The short-term goals are the things that you're going to work on a day-to-day basis. Those broken down into from the long-term goals kind of inform what your to-do list or your tasks for the day look like. And there you want to learn to prioritize, a big, huge project like building a business, or even something a little bit smaller like maybe building a website, a new website, need to be broken down into tasks, and then you have to figure out what order you want to do those tasks in. And sometimes, it makes perfect sense, step A to B to C to D, But most of the time, there are multiple things that need to be juggled more or less simultaneously, and that's where you need to start to prioritize. One thing I wanted to talk about here for a moment is urgency versus importance. Often the things that are most urgent or supposedly most urgent kind of tug at our attention. Sometimes it's, the phone call, the email, the getting the social media done because that's on your list to do for today. But I want you to stop every single day and think about what is the most important task for the long run. So maybe spending 2 hours working on that short report, working on that course isn't the most urgent, because you also have creating 3 TikToks and recording a YouTube video on your to-do list, for example. But it is the more important task because it is the moneymaker. Once you have that course launched, that will directly contribute to your income. So make sure you always prioritize important tasks and don't just let urgency and things that grab at your attention direct your day. So be intentional is what I'm saying here. And one way I do this is by making a list and coming up with my top 3 tasks for the day. Those are usually important tasks. Sometimes they're important and urgent, but more often they are important tasks that will help me get closer to my long-term goal. And I make sure that those are taken care of before I call it a day. And then you want to make sure you make time. It's easy to go into the busy work and answer emails and engage on social media, that kind of thing, and not really make any measurable progress towards your long-term or even your short-term goals. So make sure you set aside some time and be intentional about it to make sure you make progress. Time blocking is a great way to do that. So that's where you sit down and you decide, okay, today I have from 10 a.m. to noon to work on this. I'm going to block that time out. I'm going to put away my phone. I'm going to close my door, shut my door, do what I need to do to get some serious work done, to make some serious progress on a project that supports my long-term goals. And then last but not least, you want to avoid overwhelm and burnout. So don't expect too much from yourself. Take some breaks, do something other than building the business or whatever your long-term goal is. Go outside, spend some time with family, friends, loved ones, get some rest, get some sleep, and make sure that the expectations you set for yourself aren't too overwhelming, too overtaxing. Sometimes we can burn the candle on both ends for a little while. I have done it. Tracy has done it. I'm sure you have done it. But there's a limit to what we can do there. And what you don't want to do is put yourself in a place where you burn out, because it can take a very long time to recover from that when you do. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. And we would love it if you would subscribe to the channel. We have quite a bit more content coming out, hopefully pretty much on a weekly basis like this, with some YouTube shorts thrown in for fun in between. So please subscribe, go ahead and hit that little notification bell, and I will see you next week.